everyone, and thank you for signing up to a webinar today on how divorce coaches, mediators and lawyers can work together when assisting separated families. My name is Sara and I am the chair of Family Mediation Week. I'm also a partner at Hall Brown Family Law, who are proud sponsors of Family Mediation Week. I practice as a family solicitor and mediator in both children and financial matters, and Hall Brown, where I work, are located nationally with 5 offices. I'm also trained as a hybrid and child inclusive mediator, and I've practiced as a mediator now for 11 years, and I've been a solicitor for 12 years. If anyone has any questions during today's webinar, please add them to the Q&A box and we will get to them at the end. I have with me today Paul Linsell, who is a partner and head of the family law team at Boyce Turner in Reading. As a mediator, Paul has over 10 years experience, is fully accredited via the Family Mediation Council, and is able to practice using a hybrid model. And Paul also sits with me on the Family Mediation Week committee. And I'm also proud to announce that we have today our guest speaker, Sara Davison, a divorce coach, and she's also a sponsor of Family Mediation Week, who is a world-renowned author of breakup, divorce and domestic abuse. She is twice best-selling author and podcaster with 30 years of coaching experience, together with insight from her own marriage breakdown. Sara guides clients through heartbreak, betrayal, conflict, confidence building, co-parenting, workplace challenges during divorce, and dating again. Sara is an experienced media commentator and motivational speaker in the UK and US, and is a regular expert on GB News, Good Morning Britain, Talk TV, and This Morning. Sara is also a contributor for wellness and lifestyle platform Goop, and she also starred as the expert in Heartbreak Hotel, a television show based on her breakup recovery retreats. Sara, it's really great to have you here today and to lead this discussion. And I'm going to pass you over to start your presentation, and then we will have some questions and we'll have a bit of a general panel discussion after. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Let me get this up and running. Right. Beginning. Okay. Welcome. Thank you everyone for coming along. Really great to have you here. I will give you a few slides just to introduce who I am, what I do, although Sara, thank you for that really good introduction. It covered a lot of it. So yes, I'll give you a quick intro about how breakup and divorce coaches can help with mediation as well. So yes, as Sara said, I am best known as the divorce coach. I have 2 best-selling books. One I'm going to offer to you guys for free, actually, so I will tell you about that in a moment. Also, I have a podcast which is all about heartbreak to happiness. It's about people's journeys through pain to power, overcoming those and how they did that. So we've had over 500,000 downloads. So it's a great resource for clients struggling with emotional issues, as well as the practical challenges. And I also am the patron of a domestic abuse charity called the Dash charity. Some of you will know it. It is local to Windsor, Maidenhead and Slough. And that, as a survivor of abuse myself, is something that's very close to my heart. From there, we've trained in on my training school. I founded a training school to help people become breakup and divorce coaches. We've trained over 500 coaches in 25 different countries and 5 continents to help people all over the world to cope better with their breakups. So why do I do this, and why do I have such a catchy job title as the divorce coach? Well, I kind of found myself getting into this work when I found myself going through a really tough divorce myself. I found out overnight that my husband not only didn't want to be married to me, he was madly in love with somebody else. At that point, we had a global business together. So we had offices in London and Sydney, 178 staff who pretty much all knew about the affair apart from me. My son was only 1. And to make matters slightly worse, my husband made the girlfriend, his new girlfriend, a director of our business. He moved her and him into the penthouse apartment above where I lived with my son. And life was pretty tricky from there, because I soon found out as well that she was pregnant. So going through that and doing all the ugly crying, as I'm sure you see with your clients all the time, the ugly crying on the bathroom floor and the panic crying my mum at 2 a.m. in the morning, most mornings, I realised that quickly that I needed to get some help. And I've been coaching at that point for about 15 years. So I couldn't believe how it absolutely hit me like a freight train. So what I decided to do was combine my coaching skills with the divorce process, which for most of us on the outside who've never had any legal training, do not understand that process, is very scary, very intimidating, and extremely overwhelming. So I created a toolkit of tools to help me and my son get through it. But then also that's been my mission since then. I decided that it was going to be my mission to help people all over the world to cope better with their breakup too. So all the tools I created and tested on me are in both my best-selling books. And that's what we share a lot of on the podcast. But I like to interview people who have also been through it to give hope and show people that you can not only survive your breakup and divorce, but you can also learn to thrive if you learn certain tools along the way. So this is what I train all my coaches to do. And we have a really supportive international coaching community. What we do is we help clients cope not only with the emotional roller coaster, those ups and downs, but also the practical challenges that people face going through any kind of breakup. And I'll come on to those in a moment. My style of coaching that I train everybody in is a very fast, dynamic style of coaching. It's quite different to most counselling and most therapy, although obviously that they definitely have a place, but it's quite different to what we do. So it's very dynamic, it's very results focused. And as coaches, we can make suggestions, we can bring in tools and techniques, and we can really help create what I call those light bulb moments in every session for clients so that they can actually make progress. And at the end of each session, we give them a step-by-step plan. I know when I was going through my breakup that I tried therapy because that's what everyone said you should do, right? So, and that really was the only help available, was therapy specific to breakup and divorce. So I tried it, and whilst it was really good at highlighting some certain personality disorders and things like that with my ex, what it didn't do was give me a step-by-step plan, which is what I really needed. Like, what do I do next, and how does this all work? So again, that's what we create, and that maintains that momentum in between coaching sessions for clients as well. So it's an empowering toolkit designed to give them their power back so that they can dial down those negative emotions. So I strongly believe that we all of us control the remote control to our brain. But when we're born, we're not given that remote control, right? So we're just thrown into this. We're thrown into like, well, you figure it out as you go. And we learn strategies to be successful. And some of them are successful and help us. But some of them maybe we learn from our parents or other people around us. And unknowingly, they don't particularly serve us. It's just what we know. So sometimes when we're in a scenario where we're reacting to a situation because someone's done something really nasty to us, and in the divorces I tend to see, it's not really the conscious uncoupling side, it's more the aggressively severing side, as I've termed it. What we tend to find is there's a lot of hurtful actions taking place, and people are often feeling absolutely normally devastated, upset, terrified, waves of panic, those kind of emotions. And what we show people is how to dial down those emotions and take their power back. So it's really sharing a toolkit which is going to help them build their confidence, their self-esteem, and take them on even that personal development journey to rebuild their lives, rediscover who they are, and create a future that they're truly excited to move towards. And that includes techniques and tips for every single scenario that they're going to go through. So everything from heartbreak, affairs, specifically what to do if someone's cheated on you, how to deal with conflict and how to dial that down, parenting issues, co-parenting, also how do you cope without the kids, which for a lot of my clients is one of the biggest issues if they're not with you all the time, and also how to empower the kids through the breakup as well. I'm a strong believer that divorce does not have to damage kids, but it does take a parent who's healthy and can have the access to the tools and techniques to best empower their children through. So again, helping them through all those different scenarios, as well as that confidence, that self-esteem, and the future planning. And that's where a lot of the practical tips that I share every day for free on my Instagram feed come in. So things like dating tips, or should I stay in the family home? Should I move? How do I move? How do I find a home? Also things like maybe getting fit or losing weight or getting their life back on track in other ways, maybe making some single friends. So we cover so many different areas, not just specific to the actual legal process. I mean, we don't give legal advice or financial advice. We very much stick to the emotional and the practical side of things. And that's how we work alongside you. We don't step on your toes. We're not giving that kind of same advice, but we work as a team to best support the clients. So we can be there when they have those emotional outbursts, whether it's sadness or upset, whether it's anger or dialing down some of that conflict, which sometimes keeps them stuck or from making the decisions that need to be made. And we help them dial down those negative emotions so they can take their power back. And we offer that support over Zoom, over phone, and in person as well. And we also offer out of hours. So again, we're not constrained to 9. And so maybe when they can't get hold of you, or maybe when you choose to have your phones off, a lot of us are available for our clients as well. So it gives us 24-hour support for them. And because we have coaches in so many different countries, we can cover around the world as well. So what do we cover specifically? So it's breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse support. Domestic abuse, as I said, is something that's very close to my heart and something that I feel is massively underrepresented in the legal process. And again, anyone, mediators cannot be, or lawyers cannot be experts in everything, or experts in what you do. We're the experts in domestic abuse, what it is, why people get into it, why they stay, how to help them navigate the communication with a perpetrator, understanding the pitfalls of going through a divorce. Divorcing an abuser is very different to divorcing a healthy partner. As many of you will know, it means that the conflict and as they lose control, the conflict can really step up with the finances and the children, which are really the only methods of control if you're not living together anymore. So we very much specialise in that, and the trauma recovery, how to move through that as well. We also offer obviously one-to-one coaching sessions, and they're the tailored sessions where they can have a one-to-one Zoom session with a coach that they choose from a hub of different coaches. They can find someone with the right specialism or the right community, whatever they're looking for. We have coaches to cover pretty much every different walk of life. And we also offer group online support sessions as well. So if someone wants to find their tribe, maybe their family aren't as supportive, or maybe they're sick to death of them, or maybe they don't have friends over here at the moment. So again, we offer those online support sessions where they can get their questions answered by one of my accredited specialist coaches. We offer workshops as well, online and live retreats. And we also offer legal professionals training on how to spot the signs of abuse in clients and to help you with safeguarding and signposting. And one of the other things we've just launched is our care introduction package for clients, which means that when somebody signs up with you, sometimes it's difficult to see the hurt and the pain that goes on for people. We're very good at masking it. I know I was. My lawyer didn't realise how quite devastated I was and just how much ugly crying I was doing, because when I showed up in their very impressive offices, I was actually holding it together. I don't quite know how. But so what we do is we offer a care package. So when you introduce your clients to what you do, if you wanted to, you could also provide links to emotional support, to our coaching hub, our groups, and get access to a free copy of my book, The Split, to give them the step-by-step guide to getting through a breakup as well. So it just gives you that extra support that you can offer to clients if you wanted to. So that's me. If you are interested in the care package or anything I've just talked about, you can obviously email me as well. My email is Sara@saradavison.com. But yeah, follow me on Instagram if your clients are interested in latest tips and tools. I share them on there too. But that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sara. And I think that sort of moves on really well for us to sort of have a discussion about us, how we have a joined up approach, and practically how we all work together to help someone going through separation. As a mediator, when I conduct my mediations, there isn't many assessment meetings that I carry out where I don't refer to a divorce coach. I think it adds real value and offers the emotional support that a mediator and a solicitor are unable to provide or equipped to do so. And that what you mentioned, where you said about out of hours and out of office, that if you offer that support, I think that's really, really good to be able to have that additional support that we're not able to do. And I do think the joined up approach, we all offer different skills and skill sets to support separated families and to reach an outcome that everyone feels comfortable with and feels that they're able to move on and look to the future. I find as well that people open up to me more, because I see it as a mediator and a solicitor. I feel like people open up to me more in a mediation information assessment meeting than they would do when I have initial consultation as a solicitor. I think it's because of the way we do as assessment meetings. I'm carrying out suitability screening and probably asking more explorative questions and asking how they feel and more emotions, rather than focusing on the issue at hand in terms of financing it very black and white, which I know some solicitors deal with it like that. One thing I always explore is why they're separated, what would they argue about, how did they deal with the finance in the marriage, were they able to see friends and family, you know, things like did they feel controlled, or what support they have in place. And it's not that I'm asking them questions because I'm equipped to deal with them, it's for me to then be able to signpost them to people like you, Sarah, to get that support in place and be able to know what help that person needs. I'm always astounded in this job when you speak to, and any mediators out there, when you speak to husband and then you speak to wife, and actually there's two sides to every story and very different. And obviously the role as a mediator there is not for us to take sides, it's just to help them move forward in their path to dealing with the separation. And I think it's just really important. And from one of my experience of using a divorce coach, I had someone phone me and inquire about mediation. And I honestly thought it was like a mystery shopper or somebody inquiring, because they were so like direct with the questions, really together, had all it. And then I found out afterwards when she came to her assessment meeting that she'd been working with a divorce coach, and they'd helped to support and pluck up the courage to make that first step of speaking to a mediator. And afterwards I thought, oh, it wasn't about that. They just had some really good coaching and really good questions to ask and felt really informed and able to do it. And I think that just showed to me how you could tell that that person had had that support and that they felt a bit more empowered and able to ask the right questions. And I think the role of a solicitor is really important when going through mediation, as the mediator is not there to replace the solicitor. You're not there, Sarah, as a divorce coach to replace it. And I think that bit's really important, that it's like the joined up approach. It's not one way or the other. And Paul, obviously it'd be good to hear from you, from your experience as a solicitor working divorce coaches, you know, with your legal clients.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and good afternoon, everyone. I think, I mean, really to echo what you both said, I think it's the team approach that's really important there. I suppose the way I see it is that we're all sort of a tool for the client to use, and it's about getting the best from those tools. I think certainly in my experience, whether with mediation hat on or solicitor hat on, I think the coaching really gets the best out of it. And I think, as you say, it's the clients that come to you, and you all have it. You have clients who you can engage with as a solicitor or as a mediator, and they get it, and it seems to be quite easy to advise them, and the whole progress is quite effective, and you move forward quickly. And I think coaching is really accelerating that. And as I say, it means you can focus on doing what you do best, and the tool that they've really come to you for, which is your legal advice. Sort of getting into the detail of that, rather than having to try and deal with some of the other bits and pieces that perhaps we're less experienced or less qualified in dealing with. I think that's definitely the key for me. I suppose in my experience, as I say, as a solicitor, I think it depends on the client. I think, as Sara was touching on there about sort of abusive situations and domestic abuse, I think that's where, to me, some sort of coaching is frankly essential, because as solicitors, we can talk about the law, and it's all well and good when you start talking about things like non-molestation orders or whatever it might be, and the legal ability to obtain one, or even the legal consequence of obtaining one, but that's not really what it's about. Again, it's the law as a tool, and it's making sure that safety is there, and techniques and ways of handling things and managing that situation that are far more important in those circumstances. So I think there's times where coaching is frankly essential, but as I say, I think even if we can call it a standard situation, that's not quite the words I want, but a standard situation where there isn't that sort of dynamic, I think it's still really effective, because people don't know how to navigate their way through divorce and separation. People, even if they've done it before, every relationship will have been different, and the pain or the trauma of that will be different. And I think it is about learning those techniques and ways of doing things that a coach can really add that value, certainly in my experience.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I mean, I think coaching for people that are struggling with their emotions, and this is one of the things that we don't really see. I think I've just got a post going out today on LinkedIn about, I was on the way last week to speak at the Chamber of Commerce, and I got a phone call from a law firm saying that someone had come in to see them, a new client, sat down, had a meeting with them, seemed really fine, like managing, and then walked out, and they died by suicide on the way back. And this is not the first phone call I've had like that, and it happens. I mean, I don't know how many other times, but I've had 3 calls in the last 5 years saying that has happened. So yeah, obviously there's no one can be to blame for that, and it's, you know, we don't know what else is going on in the background, so just have to say that. But some people just really struggle to deal with those negative emotions, and like me, I would never go in and fall apart in front of a lawyer. I mean, it's quite intimidating for us lay people to go into mediation even, or and a legal scenario, because it is terrifying. So we just don't know. So again, I think that, yes, if you can spot it, great. I mean, domestic abuse is really hard to spot, which is one of the big challenges with it. So again, just having something that introduces that support, if people want to look at that in their own time, just as a standard introduction as part of your care package, I think is essential. And I do see more and more people doing that, but I just think it just gives another side to work as a team, but just gives that support which maybe we can't spot from what they're doing in a session with you.
Yeah, and I think it stems back to what you're saying there, Sara, about the mediation information assessment meeting. When the first thing I ever say to at the start of my mediation sessions, it's confidential today, you can speak openly, and it's really informal, and the chance for me to get to know you, you to get to know me as a mediator. And that's how I always start mine, which is very different to when you do your legal as a solicitor with your hat on. So hopefully people already feel a bit more relaxed and able to speak to you. But like you say, not everyone, people still feel on edge and things. I think one thing that I wanted to, obviously today is part of the family mediation week, so we're sort of talking about the divorce coach and how that fits in with mediation. And I've had a divorce coach assist a client in shuttle mediation, which I think's worked well. So neither party have felt comfortable being in the same room together, or as part of when we do the screening for identified domestic abuse, but they still want to engage with that. So it might be on Zoom or in separate rooms. And I always find that so hard when you tell them, because you're leaving one person in a room for maybe 10 or 15 minutes while you're going into another room virtually or in person to talk about the other person. And the other one must just feel like they're sat in a pressure cooker, feeling like they've been talked about and things outside of their control. And then when I come back into the room to tell the other person about what things they think it's your opinion, it's really hard to then say, well, this is what the other person, when they're not hearing the conversations or they think it's one-sided. So I think having a divorce coach in that session with the people, that when you're leaving that room, you've got somebody there to talk to than feeling like the walls are caving in on you. And also we're there to look at steps moving forwards. And what I find in shuttle, the other person's been sat there for 10 or 15 minutes, they've thought of all these things to tell you. And actually I've come to tell you what the other person, and it's just, and I think if you had someone that's able to re-talk about what was said and help digest that information, is really helpful in that. And not everybody needs that support, but usually one person does in a couple, or need that time. And I think that's where it works really well. And I don't think we use it enough. And I don't know if, Sara, if you've done any of that, but I think that using a divorce coach within the mediation, especially in shuttle situations, would work really well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been in quite a few shuttle scenarios, and I think they work really, really well. I think also there's a bit before that as well, helping the client before mediation, just to really understand a little bit more, talk about their fears, talk about how to manage that fear, because it is scary. I mean, I've been through mediation as a lay person, and I know I'm scared, and I'm, pretty confident human being. But when I was coming into a room with my ex talking about money and children, I mean, that is terrifying. And you're not at your best when you're trying to negotiate those things, because the fear kind of takes over. And so you're worried. There's a huge amount of anxiety. A lot of them won't have slept much before. They'll be worried, even though it's a lot more informal. And I much prefer it to a court scenario a million miles. Don't get me started on that one. But the mediation side of it, I think it can be a really healthy and so just understanding that and how it works, even though it will still be daunting for clients. So I think it's managing those expectations up front and how it's going to work. And obviously we're not there to give legal advice, but we can help them get prepared. We can help them with the sort of understanding what they need to prepare, how to control their emotions, even though ideally in mediation they're healthy relationships rather than toxic. But in those relationships, they're still upset, there's still heartbreak, always one partner is the further on down the line, however friendly it is, or okay, we both agreed to separate, one person will be a lot more comfortable than the other, usually in those scenarios. So again, it's just managing those emotions, and realizing that it's going to be a huge amount of stress and strain being there in the moment, again, really helps, because they'll be downloading everything that they're thinking as you've left the room as the mediators, and then when they come back, just keeping them calm, making sure that they feel they've got somebody on their side in there with them to talk to. And then afterwards we can download as well. And afterwards, again, it's not when it finishes, it's like, oh, great, we've come to this, if you have or you haven't come to an agreement. Afterwards, it hits them so hard. I mean, court is another level of hard, but mediation, they come out and it still hits them hard. It's a lot of stress, and it's also making sure that they're safe and they've got somewhere to go and some support system in place there too. So it's kind of before, during and after, I think, where we can make a massive difference. And a lot of my coaches will do a package. I know someone's asked a question about that. We do charge by the hour. My coaches are only £95 an hour, so it's pretty cheap on the coaching front for the one-to-one sessions. The online coaching is like £1 an hour, so that's why the group online coaching is there to support anyone. But a lot of my coaches will say, look, I'll come and I'll give you a fixed fee of this, and they'll do that. But again, if you don't need us in the room, we can still do the before and after planning as well, so we can do both.
Yeah, that's something I was going to say about, I've heard like the concept of like get mediation ready, have a session before or after, and really help to have that emotional support. And I remember one case I had a few years ago where I did the assessment meeting for both husband and wife, and it was the husband's choice to leave, and he was really calm, ready to make decisions moving forward, whereas the wife was she was in absolute shock. She cried, like I said about ugly cry, she cried from the very moment she came in. She couldn't talk. And I said that mediation wasn't suitable because she wasn't in a position emotionally to make decisions. And then they came back 9 months later to me, and she was a completely different person, really together, able to do it. And because the husband had given her that time to get to the same position he was, and from accepting that the relationship, we was able to agree everything at mediation. But often people don't let people have the time, and that's where court proceedings get in, because you'd have come for your assessment meeting, you've got 4 months till it runs out, and then they'll have spoke to their solicitor, well, they're not coming forwards, issuing proceedings, and then it gets into this bitter court battle because they're not ready to do it and the emotions are still high, and you can see that. But I know that not everyone's position have got the time, and how long do they keep them, give them to get used to the situation. So I think do you agree, Paul, in terms of the solicitor, it's really hard, the balance, isn't it, between the two?
It is. I think there's a couple of things that I just want to pick up on that. I think the first is, again, the sort of team approach. And I know someone in the chat has said about that sort of being the best approach, the perfect scenario. And I think that's true. I think whether you're a mediator or a solicitor, I think it's also looking at how you're doing your work and looking at your obligations to your clients, because I think as a mediator, as you say, Sarah, you've got to be sure that that person is going to be able to engage in mediation effectively and make informed choices. But that's pretty much the same obligation as a solicitor. You have to be sure that they're understanding your advice and that they're making choices that are in their best interests. And I think if they haven't got coaching support or some sort of support guiding them through and getting them ready to be in a position to do some of that hard stuff, and it is hard stuff, I think you've just got to be really cautious about whether you're fulfilling your obligations in your role, frankly. So I think that is really essential. And yeah, I think in terms of people coming to us and having that sort of coaching support and things like that, it's immensely valuable in my experience. I think they've simply got to have it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is a bar to like the joined up approach is the cost element, because people come to me and think, I can't afford a divorce coach, a solicitor, a mediator. And I'm sort of just going to ask you both if you think it is more cost effective to have sort of that joined up approach.
Well, if you think about that lady that you were just talking about in that case study, where she came and she obviously paid for the mediation, right? So, and then she couldn't do it, so she left. I mean, that's the sort of thing that we can make sure the client is ready to get into that room and do it. So I have lots of tools. One of them is like zip up your Teflon suit. It's to deal with pressure, to deal with any kind of difficult scenarios. We do a lot of visualization with them. We walk them through difficult scenarios. We do kind of like worst case scenario as well with some clients, so that they, this is as bad as it gets. Anything else is a bonus. So we know they're properly prepared. So again, there's a lot that we can do to avoid that. So, if they wanted a session, £95 to make sure that they go in there and get the most out of that session, instead of having to walk away with those costs and come back again and do it again later. It's actually, in those kind of cases, it can be money well spent. I absolutely think we can keep the costs down for them and help them navigate that a lot easier than having that conflict or high emotions.
And I agree. I mean, I think in terms of costs, it's very easy sometimes to look at costs in isolation. And I think you've got to look at the bigger picture. And I think actually investing in proper support, whether it's coaching support, whether it's legal advice, or whether it's mediation as a process, I think ultimately will usually pay dividends. I mean, I've had situations in the past where I've been advising my client as a solicitor and saying, why don't we offer some financial support for their spouse to have some coaching and things, because perhaps they're not ready to mediate yet, and they've perhaps gone to a mediation session and it's not been effective because the other party isn't emotionally in a place to handle the sort of things that they're having to handle. And really it's about getting them up to that level, whether, and again, same sort of principles with legal advice. It might be that they don't have the legal information, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, and they need some support on that front. But it's about getting everyone to that right place. I think the more we start to see it as almost sort of three legs of a stool, I suppose, if you take one away, it's all going to fall over. I think that's important, because it is true. I think if you don't have the emotional capacity as a client to be dealing with things, and the techniques and the ability to sort of tap into that cognitive functioning to make some really big life-changing decisions about stuff, it's not going to work. If you don't have the legal advice and the input to know even what you're supposed to be thinking about and dealing with, it's not going to work. And if you don't have an effective process that's going to guide you through all of that, probably together, then again, it's not going to work, because you're going to end up in court, and that's going to be far more expensive than paying for lots of coaching and lots of legal advice and lots of mediation. So I think, yes, I understand that costs are an issue, and when you start talking about shuttle mediation and possibly having a coach sitting in with you, a solicitor sitting in with you, and the mediator's costs on top, that can be a very expensive day, or even a few days, depending on how you structure the sessions. But when you compare that to the cost of going through a court process, it's a tiny fraction of the cost. So I think it's always a difficult one with costs, because you never know, and I appreciate that every circumstance is different. So it's always going to be hard to sort of give a ballpark as to this is the best way to do things, because again, something we may touch on in a moment, sort of abusive parties in the mediation process. Again, if mediation isn't going to come up with a resolution, then that cost, ultimately you haven't got an outcome from it. So you do have to bear that in mind as well.
Can I just add one thing there? One of the things I've seen probably more in the last sort of 12 months is that there is sometimes there is that cost implication, but I've seen a lot more mediators training as breakup and divorce coaches, and then they can then fill in for their business to do that, offer that support in-house rather than having to go out to a coach. So that was another option if the costs are an issue, just to get their training in-house, and then you can do that part as well. So that is another option, which I've seen more and more people do. In fact, we've got quite a few legal professionals training with us at the moment, which has been an interesting shift. Before, it was mainly the heartbroken who've been through it, who said, I want to go and help other people, a bit like my story. But we've definitely seen a shift to more legal professionals now, and then taking those skills in-house. So that is another way to navigate those costs if you do want to support your clients like that.
I think just
sorry,
go on, Sarah.
No, go, Paul. I was going to go on to another question. So
I was just going to say, to add to that, I saw there's been a question come in about sort of a lot of coaching in mediation, and we need to understand each other's roles, and obviously that's part of what this talk is. But I agree with what Sara was saying about that, actually solicitors and mediators upskilling themselves so that they don't necessarily become the coach in the role, but they understand coaching and they understand some of the techniques, so they know exactly when, okay, this client is in front of me, they're really going to benefit from this sort of approach, let's get them in front of this particular coach, and things like that. I think understanding it far more is going to be essential as we move forward.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. I think that's a good way, and that sort of leads into my next question I was saying about, so there's lots of talk about using neutrals within mediation process, and that's something that I'm doing a webinar on Friday with Mazaz and Susanna Smales on Friday about. But Sara, would you ever come into a mediation as a neutral coach? Is that something that's possible?
I think that's very difficult to do because I think as a coach, we're working usually one-on-one with clients. So when we're put into a room to have to look after two people, that's a very different skill set. Now, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm talking about most of my coaches. I personally wouldn't want to do that. I think we go in as a neutral for our client. We're not there as a neutral for both parties, we're there for one. And also being in the room isn't necessarily where we need to be. I think working outside, being there as someone they can come out to and talk to, again, is actually usually the best way that I work with clients. Yeah, we're not in there with everything going on, because I think also there's a lot of emotions that are going on. There's a lot of dynamics, and we can't give advice to both parties because we are there to protect our client, right? And if both of them are a client and there's a conflict there, it's very difficult to give the best advice to the right person. So for me, I think that's a bit of a conflict of interest, and it's certainly not something that I would do personally or my team.
And one thing I wanted to ask you, Sarah, as well, which and I think other people sort of asked the same question. What's the difference between like therapy and coaching? So when we're mediators and lawyers and you're suggesting therapy or coaching, you've just a little bit more about the sort of different work techniques and things.
So, I mean, I can't talk for all counsellors and all therapists, but yeah, they tend to be very different to coaching. Coaching is a lot more dynamic usually. So we can give suggestions, we can bring in tools to dial down those negative emotions, get those fast positive transformations. So it tends to work a lot faster because it's a lot more practical, and also we're giving a step-by-step guide, rather, you know, a plan, an action plan that they can tick off over the next in between sessions. So they can say, right, we'll work on what the problem is, we'll break it down, we'll look at all the options, we'll find a way for them that they think is the best way forward for them, and then we'll support them through that. So it's very much more practical, results focused style of working with a client. We do talk a little bit about the past, but we only talk about their whole story once. We hear it in the first session only, from beginning to end. Now, I'm not talking for all coaches. And that's one of the things, I think it's a question about qualifications as a coach, that, you know, coaching is a non-regulated industry. To be honest, if you know anything that's going on in the family court system about family court experts and things, that, you know, even therapists that are regulated is not necessarily a thing that gives you much confidence, to be fair. But coaching is not regulated, and it's not around the world actually. And so again, I understand that sometimes there are concerns about how do we know we're getting a good coach. Well, first of all, I mean, people that have been referred or from clients that have had a good background. Obviously, I accredit coaches, and the reason I do that is because I only interested in coaches that are outstanding. So the coaches that come through my training go through a really rigorous training. They've got all the tools and techniques, and they do coursework, and they have to get a certain standard. And if they don't hit it, they don't pass. We just work with them until they get there. So again, look for accreditation, look for somebody that has good referrals and a track record, somebody that hasn't done any specific training on breakup and divorce. Just a general life coach won't be specialist in this field. But one of the things I would say is, like, we are the only people that offer them the master practitioner training accreditation, which is accredited by a domestic abuse charity as well, which is for coaches who are specialists in domestic abuse. You have to be really careful with who you choose on those domestic abuse cases. They probably won't see so many in mediation, but that would be the one massive red flag, to be careful that you get the right qualified person for that.
Can I just add as well, because I saw the question come in the Q&A about, the question was, how do we know who is and who is not a good divorce coach? So I mean, obviously as solicitors referring or as mediators, I think there's all those things that Sara just mentioned, but I think the key actually in all of this work and sort of a true joined up approach is getting to know people. And sort of getting to know that you can work as a team and trusting people that you're working with, and that's not always easy. I think it's about reaching out to people, it's about going to events, it's about using LinkedIn or whatever it is, and just getting to know what people are doing, what their style is, because I think much like with solicitors or mediators or divorce coaches, there are different ways of doing things and just different personalities, different styles. And you may think, actually, no, this coach perhaps isn't quite the right one for this person, or the right issues or whatever, because coaches are starting to be much more specialized as well. But actually this one is, and I think, again, that's fine. And it's about, as I said before, the way I always see it is it's about having the right tools for the job. And we are all tools for the job, ultimately, for the client. They're trying to get through their their changing life circumstances and sort of survive that as well as start to thrive with it. And we're there to assist with that and making sure we can signpost them to the appropriate person is part of our role.
Yeah, and I just add that I totally agree, because every coach is different. And again, it is a people by people in this industry. Like if for me, like as a coach, our clients come to us because they resonate with us as an individual client. So people may not want to be coached by me, but they may really resonate with someone else who's on my coaching hub. So we have all the profiles on there. So it's like a menu of different coaches. They do little videos, so you can get to see the coach. You can book a free call with them to see if you like them. So we do have a way, because it is people by people, and you do have to connect with that coach. So we have all the specialisms, we have all the different areas, if they've been, if they've done the master practitioner, if they're a domestic abuse specialist, or maybe they're a breathing expert in a previous life, or, yoga, whatever. We have all those sort of things. So you can pick different communities, different backgrounds, different specialist areas. I think that is really important, what Paul said, to pick the coach as well that you resonate with, because it is a people business. You're sharing a lot of intimate details. So that's key.
Just touching on, like we were saying about domestic abuse, so the go-to sort of mediation model, if there is domestic abuse, is the hybrid model that me and Paul both practice in as well. I was just thinking, if we were doing a hybrid mediation, and Paul, you probably do more of the hybrid mediations as a solicitor as well, like myself, because you're sort of recommending that process to clients and sort of recognising the issues. So when I speak to other solicitors, I seem to have done more of them, but I think it's because then you're advising as a mediator and knowing how it works. And sometimes I'm thinking having a divorce coach there in a hybrid setting, whether if you're there as a solicitor as well, so not just without them, whether that's too many people in the room, or whether you think that would be a good dynamic.
I don't think it's a bad dynamic, if I can put it that way. I think having, again, the appropriate people in the room is the way I would see it. I don't think the number is necessarily a big problem. I think when you're in a hybrid model and you're invariably doing that on a shuttle basis, because you can't hold a confidence if it's in a joint room, it's easier. Because if you're in joint sessions and you've suddenly got one person with their lawyer and their coach and the other person on their own, I think immediately you've got a dynamic that you have to manage as a mediator, and that would be more challenging. But I think as a solicitor in that environment, again, great. I think, frankly, because very often what you're doing as a solicitor, whether you're in a hybrid mediation or frankly a court and having discussions at court, whatever, and you're sitting in the room with your client and things are kind of happening back and forth, is you're doing a lot of the coaching role anyway, and you're trying to sort of tap into that, and you're sort of managing that person's emotions, but you're not really qualified to do it. So having someone there who knows what they're doing, who's been working with that person, has already understood what techniques that person's really going to need in that moment from a coaching perspective, is great. Because then when they come to you and say, right, I now need to know about this bit, what do you think in terms of the advice? Fantastic, we can get on and do our jobs as effectively as we possibly can. So I'm a big fan of it. I think, hybrid mediation, as you know, Sarah, that's something I 100% think is the effective model. But I think inviting or having coaches into that as well is just going to make it more effective.
Yeah. And Sara, how do you feel about, do you suggest mediation to clients that you're coaching about, if there is domestic abuse present? What sort of information do you tend to give to them?
Well, unfortunately, hybrid isn't a very well-known concept amongst clients. I find they come to me and they don't know what that is. So yeah, it's definitely something that I would suggest they speak to their legal team about. It's not for me to tell them what to do on that front, but I definitely highlight and say that this is an option. Have you heard about it? Does your solicitor provide that? Talk to them about it. For me, the family court system is so traumatizing and so difficult, especially if there's sort of abuse, that there's no win situation, in my opinion. If you go to court, it may as well say casino above the door in a lot of the cases, depending on who's judge and who you're up against and all the rest of it. So for me, there's a big problem with the family court system. As you know, I campaign a lot at government levels to change as much as we can to support victims of abuse. But one of the things is that hybrid gives us a glimmer of hope that there is another way of trying to resolve it. I do think that it could go both ways. If you can go in there and it's run properly with people that understand, and you have a coach who understands it. I think doing it without a specialist domestic abuse coach in the room, I would be very nervous about, because the trauma of being even in the vicinity, or if it's over Zoom and they're on the, I mean, I feel it now just thinking about it, having done it many times myself. I understand that that is very difficult and triggering for clients. So there's a lot more than any legal professional can understand, unless you've been in that situation, that needs to be dealt with. So if you're going to do hybrid, you do need a specialist coach in there for absolute sure. Otherwise, you're going to traumatize, or the client will go through trauma, no doubt about it. It's a fact. But if you think about how that goes as opposed to court, obviously it's great because it keeps the finances down, the costs down for the client, and emotionally, hopefully, they are more protected. But I do have a concern that it could potentially be weaponized by the wealthier perpetrators as something that gives a glimmer of hope, and then just, no, we're not doing that, and now we're going to have my 2 days, have a day at hybrid. I'll also have the week in the family courts. I mean, I'm just a bit concerned, but I guess, I'd rather people would try the hybrid than go to court, because the downside of court is devastating. And there's lots of stats that show that 82% of victims of abuse are re-traumatized by the court system and some of the people in it, rather than their ex going through that family court. So yeah, I mean, definitely, I think it's definitely a positive step forward, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. And yeah, I haven't actually worked in a hybrid situation with a domestic abuse client, so if that comes up, I'd love to try it and see just how well it is working.
Yeah, and I think I did one of my pledges last week from Family Mediation Week was to speak to my local domestic abuse agencies, and when I went and chatted to them, they was a bit concerned of perpetrators of abuse continuing that abuse through the mediation process. But one of the things I sort of talked to them was, well, they do that in court proceedings anyway by not doing disclosure, not doing that. And I think they do the same in court, but it drags it out for much longer than you would do in a mediation. But the problem with people that are doing that is they won't agree to mediation, and it's a voluntary process. So if they're wanting to do that, they're going to do, and that's where the courts should be there for people like that who are continuing that abuse. You do need the courts, and hopefully if people are directed more to mediation and doing other dispute resolution, that the courts will be more free to be able to deal with cases like that in a more timely manner, so that that abuse isn't continuing, I think personally, and using the courts for what they should be there for. And I think sometimes
purpose on the domestic abuse front, so yeah, if that's what they're there for, we've got a problem, but okay.
No, I just mean to stop for having some orders or something in place if people are not doing like financial disclosure and things, that they can do that. And I think just one thing to say as well is we talk about hybrid mediation, but it can be like integrated mediation, some people call it, or it doesn't have to be like a special accreditation to have these other people together. It's just an adaptation, and it probably goes on the training of each mediator individually and how confident they are at having other people, in the process. So again, it's getting to know the mediator. If you do have a case where there is domestic abuse, speak to the mediator. I'm always happy for any solicitors to phone me up and ask how I deal with that case. And I'm sure, Paul, as a mediator, you probably would. And sometimes it's picking up that phone and making sure you're getting the right people in place to assist them.
Yeah, I think
we've had... Yeah.
So I was just going to say, I think as a mediator and as a solicitor as well, and I think again it comes back to, we have to assist the clients in the best way possible and make sure that they've got the resource that they need to manage things in the way that they need it. And I think, with domestic abuse situations, I think hybrid mediation is probably the least worst process, if we can put it that way, because again, even with adaptations and things, you think about court processes, and yes, you have to tick all these boxes when you're making applications and saying they need separate meeting rooms, they need this, and so on and so on. Well, mediation deals with all of that as standard, let alone when you're in tune with, there's a bit more going on here. So I think with hybrid mediation, you can be much more nuanced. And again, I think picking up on something Sara was saying about a specialist, you really do need a specialist in there, because we all know the dynamic of abuse is not as straightforward as this person has hit this person, and therefore, okay, well, they're in separate rooms, they're in separate places, we've dealt with that risk. There's far more to it, and understanding the sort of coercive nature, the controlling nature, and all the different behaviours that are coming through. As a mediator, you're not necessarily going to be fully on that, even though we're trained and we're alert and in tune with it. When you're in the throes of a mediation, going back and forth and shuttling and so on, yes, you're thinking about it, but you're not necessarily fully into each individual, what they're experiencing and what they're going through. And also as a solicitor, you're not going to be into that sort of a role. So I think having that third person in the room in a hypermediation where there's an abusive situation, I think, again, we've talked about kind of the perfect scenario. There is no perfect scenario, but I think that's as good as it gets, trying to resolve those really difficult situations.
Yeah, and just to point out that a lot of clients won't know they're in an abusive relationship either. And that's something that you think, well, is it abusive? Is it healthy? And they go, no, it's fine, you know, and then they'll tell you what's going on. And I mean, some of it can be really severe. I had a client tell me, well, I'm scared of him, but I'm not terrified. So it's not abuse, right? It's okay. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, but this is normal. It's not, I was in an abusive relationship and didn't realize it till I got out of it. And I realized I'd normalized and minimalized so much bad behavior, because otherwise I'd have to make a decision to leave. And it can happen to very intelligent, educated people. It happens to everyone. And so they may not be acknowledging it. So there's no chance, if you're not a specialist, that you're going to pick up on it either. So again, it's just belt and braces. It's just making sure that you're making the right things, because as we know, a bad decision or not giving them the right support can lead to having their children removed, and trauma, CPTSD, all sorts of things. So it's a serious, serious thing. And that's why I created the training, because I'm so passionate, because I deal with picking people off the floor who've had the tough end of this, because there hasn't been that support or understanding. So it's, yeah, Paul, I totally agree. It's super important.
I think the difference with a profession that me and Paul are in with as solicitor and mediators, and what you've done, Sara, is so you can say you're a specialist in domestic abuse and you've got additional training for your coaches. For us as mediators, when you're searching for a mediator, there's not a tick box to say you've been on a different course for domestic abuse. And even as solicitors, you'll go onto Resolution's website to find a solicitor, for instance. It doesn't say if they're specified and been on courses for domestic abuse. And even with the Family Mediation Council website, you're looking for mediators, but they don't specifically say if you've done a hybrid course, if you train integrated, if you take on cases that are using different people. And I think that's where we need to make a shift, and conversations like this is great, and we've got really good attendances today of the people that are listening to it. I think more emphasis and more people need to go on that training to be able to point that out. And that's why I think it's really important for everyone who's here today as solicitor or mediators, that getting to know your local mediator solicitors and people that you're referring to, and ask them, have you been on a training course? What have you done to do this? Because me and Paul as mediators, you have to do your reaccreditation for every 3 years, and part of that you have to demonstrate what you've done as training for domestic abuse. And we have things, there's lots of mediators out there that are not accredited mediators that say that they are and not doing that. So again, if anyone's looking for a mediator, always check on the Family Mediation Council website, because they're where the accredited mediators are. And then you know that that mediator's had some training for domestic abuse, because we know every few years when you do your accreditation, you have to prove what you've been doing and agreeing with the rules and certain things that we have to do. I'm conscious we've had lots and lots of questions in, which is great, because it's obviously questions that people are wanting to do. So I don't know whether in the last sort of 8 minutes or so that we've got, that we answer some of the questions that we've got. So we've had quite a few. I'm just going to have I don't know if you two can pick any out while I'm just having a quick look through. Someone's asked about how much you've charged, but Sara, you've sort of addressed that one while we've been talking, haven't you?
I mean, I offer a range of different products. So if someone has no money, they can come on to, we have a free trial, which is part of my client care package I talked about in my talk, which I can send out to anyone who wants to email me, Sara@saradavison.com. But basically it's, you get a week's free trial of our online group coaching sessions. So that means they can, any of your clients that come to you can try them out for free. So they're the online Zoom groups where they're run by my accredited specialist coaches who all specialize in domestic abuse. So they can come on with other people. It's a group session, but it's super powerful and really like life-saving in a lot of cases. Or they can have the one-to-one sessions, and the link to that is in the care package. Plus, they get the access to the book. So the groups are only, after the free trial, it's £7.40 a week for 8 hours of specialist coaching support. So super cheap, up to £95 an hour for the one-to-ones.
That's great. And one of the other questions that someone's put on there is about, I heard that UK laws will be or are being changed to make mediation mandatory during divorces. There has been a consultation paper, and for those of you that was at the launch this morning, we heard from Justice Knowles about the family changes to the family procedure rules. So they're not making mediation compulsory, but they are making a few changes. So there'll be more effective enforcements to attend a mediation information assessment meeting and review any exemptions early on and provide evidence. The rationalising the exemption, so before you'd be able to say things like, oh, now we can do it online, you'd say the distance, or if there's domestic abuse, so that the change in things like that, and the putting effective measures in place to encourage judges to consider dispute resolution at any stage in the proceedings and use like the natural gaps in proceedings for that purpose. And there's going to be more scrutiny of non-court dispute resolutions, and there could be cost sanctions as well that they're putting in place if people aren't considering non-court dispute resolution. So there is things, I don't know if you've got what else to add there, Paul, if I missed anything, but there is things that are changing, but it's definitely not making mediation compulsory.
It's not compulsory. I think the important point to note though is that a MIAM, although there are some exceptions, broadly a MIAM is compulsory. So someone has to really be doing that before they can go to court. And I think that's a really good thing, frankly, as long as the MIAM's done effectively. And I think there's a few comments in the question and answer chat as well about sort of MIAMs drawing out issues of abuse where people didn't realise that they were perhaps in abusive relationships, as well as sort of identifying signposting to coaches or all sorts of things like that. So it does offer an opportunity as a MIAM to bring everything together. Just changing tack slightly, I saw there was a question that came in about the hybrid model of mediation, and I appreciate we didn't sort of explain that, and so just to sort of pick that out as well. I mean, essentially what hybrid mediation is a different way of mediating compared to traditional mediation, and the main difference being that in traditional mediation, anything that is shared with the mediator has to be shared with the other party, and so if you're told something, you're immediately sharing it, even if you're not in the same room. Whereas with hybrid mediation, you have the ability to hold confidences, not on issues of fact, but on sort of ideas or thoughts about resolving things, whether it's settlement proposals or whatever it might be. The big advantage of that is that you can really tap into what someone's thinking and what their thoughts are on something, without having to share it with the other party. So it kind of frees everyone up that little bit more. Usually you'd be considering much more about having solicitors involved as well, although that can happen in the traditional model as well. So that's really what hybrid mediation is.
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. And I think some other things that have just come in, bear with a second. Someone's asked about, so there's a voucher scheme available for mediation. So if you've got anything to do with children matters, then there's £500 that the government are putting forwards, which tend to cover your first session, and it's not means assessed, and that's still ongoing. What they've asked Sara is, there's anything equivalent to for divorce coaching for reduced income?
Sadly not, which is why we do the online group sessions, just as like really low cost. Doesn't even cover my costs actually for running them, but I want to do that to give people access to it. So yeah, that's the cheapest way that I've figured out, because this is everything I wish I'd had access to when I was going through mine. And for me, luckily I had some money, which all went to the legal team, but I had some money to get me through it. But I know so many people don't. And this is not just about the people that can pay to come for coaching for me. This is about getting these tools out to everyone, which is why I've got the podcast, which is free support. We've got the books, we've got the online support group. So I'm trying to grow a portfolio of things to get that support out, but there isn't a voucher scheme, unfortunately, at the moment. I mean, I am talking to the government about several different things, but yeah, that takes quite a while. So sadly, it's not imminent.
It'd be a great idea actually if they did have that, you know, or at least they had a choice of using it for different things when they've given that funding. And one of the other questions that had come in about like a streamlined package, and there is other parts of the country that have already a bit more ahead of this, of having like a package together where you automatically in the first meeting like a planning meeting, you have solicitors, mediators, divorce coaches, financial advisor. And it is something I'm quite passionate about and moving forwards, but I think we're a while off there. But hopefully if people get good teams together, that when you're as a solicitor or as a mediator and you're seeing that person first, that you're saying about getting them people, and if you build up your network and you've got trusted financial advisors that you use, solicitors, mediators, coaches, and all involved in the process, that hopefully you can, it's inspired you all today to have them connections in place. Just looking at some other, someone said about one second. Oh, about it's always frustrating when solicitors send a MIAM referral and say we just want their MIAM certificate, and saying, is there anything we can do to educate solicitors that a joined approach benefits the clients? Well, that's the whole purpose of the family mediation that we're doing, and we're doing a seminar each day to lawyers and mediators and trying to get past that. And I think the new requirements for a MIAM gets past that as well, because my MIAM's there's 50 minutes to an hour and a half, and I think they're getting so much more information. And I personally make it, if I get them referrals that come through and they say I just need the form, court form, I spend a lot of time with them going through that and explaining the information. And most times when they come in and they hear about it, they're able to make an informed decision themselves. And then in turn, that sometimes is questioned, their advice they're getting from a solicitor, if they've just been told it's a tick box. And I have known some mediation clients afterwards being, you know, thought, well, is this the right path? This is the advice I'm getting. So, you know, things, you know, may change. I'm just realising we're running out of time. We've got loads of other questions. It's been a really good talk, and thank you, Paul and Sara, for your time. If anybody does, you know, I'll speak to Helen from the Family Mediation Council about us getting something together and answering some of these questions, because obviously it's a really good topic and everyone's wanted to do it, but sadly we've run out of time because there's more webinars taking place. But I'll try get something out and answer the rest of the questions, and so we can go through them, because like I say, it's obviously a good conversation that and everyone's thinking about it. And if anyone does have any questions, I'm pretty sure we'll all be happy to answer any if you want to contact us direct. So thank you for that, and hopefully you can all join us on some more of the webinars that are taking place later this week for Family Mediation Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.